some basic factors when we bring it very carefully into our remembrance and keep this remembrance alive, then it will bring spontaneously a different quality of understanding and sensibility in our life. One of the factors which I want to first bring the attention to is the limitation of knowledge. To bring it into one's own visibility that we are conditioned and what we see is a projection through our conditioning, and our knowledge is based on these standards and values which we have collected in an unconscious level, and it's part of the conditioning. So what we are seeing and what we imagine to understand in the usual way is very relative, and it is not the reality. That is why those who are insightful, they become aware of the fact that their knowledge is very relative, and that, like Socrates has been putting it when he said, "I know only one thing that I don't know." And this is what the oracle also was commenting on when he said that Socrates has become aware of it. That is why he is called one of the wisest people on the earth in that time. It is not easy to recognize it because we are almost hypnotically entangled in our knowledge. We are, through the knowledge, also identified with our idea of being separate from the whole, identified with the body, identified with the personality. So the knowledge and this identification together is what we call the ego. It is a belief. It is a hypnotic belief. But the fact is that even though we may be believing all that, our each moment in this life process is supported from life. We are part of the nature. We are an undivided, inseparable aspect of the life process. So, not holding to knowledge, becoming aware of our ignorance, remembering this conditioning, recognizing that I'm not seeing that what really is, I'm only projecting, enables us to become disentangled from the blind identification. It helps us to become a little bit distant from our so-called idea of the I. And this is very, very basic, very, very important. Because once you see that I really don't know, my knowledge is very relative, it is functional, it has a relative value in the game of the world, but that's not the truth. So this is the first of the reminders which I would like everybody to take into consideration, that whenever you are judging anybody, whenever you are labeling anybody, whenever you are coming in touch with anybody, or also judging yourself, remember that I really don't know. Observe the judgment, observe how it is automatically coming, but deep within remember, I really don't know. This is how it appears to me, this is my projection, This may have a certain functional relative relevance, but it is not the reality, it is not the truth. That is when you remember that the ignorance is more basic than knowledge. Because this conscious ignorance is what leads to a state of innocence, where you don't get trapped in this projection through the knowledge. That is why it is very, very important. And this is valuable also to understand it also in some of the sayings from different teachings. When you learn to look through the eyes of innocence, the mirror-like consciousness is one way of indicating it. The witnessing consciousness is another way of indicating it. Or when it is said that when you become again like a child, that is how you can enter into the kingdom of God. These are all poetic ways to indicate a different way of connecting to life, a different way of perceiving the reality, a different way of being with that what is, so that a deeper understanding, a deeper perception, a perception which is based in the wholeness of the reality can become possible. That is why when you are having these interactions in any situation and you are remembering this absurdity and relativeness of knowledge, the untrueness of your judgment, then you will not get trapped in seriousness. Then you will not become caught in feeling of being superior to somebody. Then you will not get trapped in any kind of arrogance which comes from this misunderstanding. You will see that everybody is what they are. So deep within, it will bring a different sensibility, a different quality of perception, which is leading you towards the truth. That is why this is very, very important. So that is the first remembrance, that in all interactions, when judgments are coming up in you, remember the ignorance. Remember the falsity, the relativeness of all judgment in terms of human connections, in terms of how we fix and label people, so that you can be present to look and see more directly and deeply. So this is the first reminder. And the second reminder is also very, very basic, because these are two things which I would like everybody to remember, since that will bring about a big difference in your way of experiencing the reality. When it becomes remembered, when it becomes considered, when you start recognizing that you and nature are not two separate things, that you exist as part of nature, that it is not that you are here and the nature is outside, the trees and the animals and the flowers, and you are separate, other persons, they are all outside. So nature is somewhere else and you are separate. This is, as I already mentioned, a certain kind of hypnotic belief which we have gotten into. Yes, it gives us the chance to enter into the game of duality, enter into a certain way of being with the society, with the dualistic process of life. But it is also very misleading And finally, it is behind much of the suffering in human life when we imagine that we live separate from the reality, we are separate from the nature. We are part of a non-dualistic reality. We are part of one reality. So, how do we remember this? It is not in just going on repeating to oneself that I am part of one reality. That is not the point. When in you the idea of the separate I, the identification with the body, the identification with the personality, is observed by you, don't hold to it. Don't go with it blindly. Consciously put that aside and look and feel. So, considering life more carefully and deeply will be very, very valuable. It is not only that the science has now made it more easy for us to consider and understand how we are interdependent, but when you become inwardly quiet, you will start feeling and sensing the reality in a very different and deep way. So the second remembrance is to bring the attention to the idea of separation, to the identification which we experience in different moments. And that you can do when you are going to eat or drink something, because that will be a point where in a way we are taking something from outside, but you can also see that what we take from outside is becoming part of ourselves, and it is an ongoing circle, ongoing cycle. And then you also see that you breathe in, but you also breathe out. So a certain dynamism is going on constantly through this movement, and that what was part of you inside becomes outside, and what was outside somewhere, when you breathe in, it becomes part of you. So you can become more aware that behind this obvious so-called reality, there is another reality which is the deeply interconnected, non-dualistic reality, where we are part of nature and where we are not separate from the nature. This not being entangled in a state of identification with the body and the mind is very, very valuable, because that is when you can observe the body, observe the mind, and relax. When you are the observer of the body and the mind, you are also going beyond the tensions and the struggles, because you are simply a non-interfering presence. And in this state, you notice that it's a different way of being. It's a different way of experiencing, seeing that what is. So this will be very valuable when, before you drink or eat, just take some moments to feel it, notice it, remember it, and recognize this interconnectedness. Bring attention to this ongoing dynamism, because while you take the food in, and while you are observing the breath which is taking place at that time, you notice it more clearly, more directly, more immediately. And this is very valuable. So these are two very basic things, but the more it becomes conscious to you, the more you are remembering it, it will bring about a very valuable transformation in your life. That is, you start realizing the wonder, the beauty, the blessedness that what life is. Because even though we have heard it many times, even though you have maybe spoken about it and considered it in certain moments, we forget it and we go on living automatically. We go on projecting through the same conditioned way and forget all this. So bringing deliberately attention to these basics is coming to the reality. It is coming to yourself, being authentically yourself. And this is the way you live your intelligence. Otherwise, we are just caught up in some projections. But when you are connecting to yourself, connecting to the wholeness of the moment, you give room for your intelligence to manifest through you. So this is valuable when you work with these reminders and let it become a support